Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. I'm Rahul. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ImageKit. And this is one of the first webinars that we're doing after a really, really long time. So thank you so much for joining in. And this is one of the first webinars that we plan on doing in a series of webinars. So you will keep getting probably invites every month from our team to join on different webinars. And the aim in these webinars would be that, we'll not just walk you through ImageKit, right? So today it's not going to be a demo of ImageKit. It's going to be, we'll take you through different practices of loading videos natively on your websites and apps, whether you are using it for your product videos, for user-generated content, for any other kind of videos that you want to embed on your website or app. We will take you through some best practices. Yes, we will use ImageKit to demonstrate those best practices, but whatever you learn from this webinar is something that you would be able to take back to your team and use it to implement native video experiences using whatever technology you want to use in the future. And that's what we plan on doing with every other webinar that we do in the future as well. So, yep, thank you so much for joining in. This session is being recorded for everyone's information. We'll take a couple of breaks in between for Q&A as well, right? I'll pause around 20 minutes from now for the first set of Q&A. So just drop all your questions in the Q&A section. And there would also be some polls that we would be doing during the course of this webinar so that we understand a bit more about your requirements, get some more feedback about, how do you feel about this webinar or what changes should we do in the future, right? So let's quickly get started, right? Videos, all of you would know that every website has started incorporating videos, or every app has started using videos very heavily in the last few years, right? Whether it is, let's say, e-commerce website using product videos for their products, or it's like an Instagram or a TikTok kind of an interface where you have a lot of reels that are being posted, or whether it is user-generated reviews that are being posted on website or any other kind of content, Netflix, etc. Videos have become, the most important content piece right now, or the content format right now on websites and apps, right? Just for an example, I have Amazon opened up on my website right now. You can see that there are some product videos that Amazon uses. There are customer reviews, and even our own website on ImageKit, we do use videos to demonstrate different features on our own website, right? So videos are here to stay. And whenever we talk about, let's say, hosting videos on our website, the most, let's say, the basic thing that comes to everyone's mind is that why not just host it on YouTube, right? It's a completely free platform. In fact, you would have a poll right now on your screen, which would, ask about what platform do you use for your videos. But YouTube is the most common one. It's absolutely free to use. You do not have to do anything. Just create a Gmail account, log into YouTube, and start uploading videos, right? And the added advantage is that it also gives you that distribution and search traffic, right? So for example, if I were to create a video where I want people across the globe to be able to find that video and search that video on that internet, YouTube is the place to go, right? YouTube would be the preferred platform to upload that video if I want other people to discover it. However, if I want to use a product video, or if I want to integrate a user generated review video on my website, or I want to create a TikTok kind of an interface, I cannot do that, right? Because YouTube presents all of these ads or irrelevant content suggestions to the users when they browse the video, right? So if I take a quick example, I have this page that I have created, and there would be a bunch of examples that we look at during this webinar. This particular page has a YouTube video embedded, right? It's a really simple iframe integration. I've uploaded a video on YouTube and use an iframe integration on my page. And when I play this video, and if I pause somewhere in between, you can see that there are quite a few suggestions that are coming up. There's this YouTube logo that comes up, and I cannot do much about it, right? So that's really the biggest downside of hosting videos on YouTube, that you have no control over the user experience that you will give to your users, right? The next step that comes from YouTube is, people usually talk about hosting content or hosting their videos on Vimeo, right? So Vimeo doesn't, it doesn't have any ads, right? So it's ads free. It is still very user friendly. It gives you that interface to upload videos. You do not have to set up anything on your own. You just copy the Vimeo player or the URL that you get from it, and you just embed it on your website, right? The player has some customization options available as well, right? So it's much better than hosting on YouTube. But the downside is that it's still expensive. You do not have as much control over the user experience as one would need if you have to create something that really gels well with the rest of the website interface. There is no content discovery like YouTube. And the biggest downside is that, let's say if your video workflows, for example, you are getting some video reviews uploaded, or maybe you are asking your users to upload some content on your app or on your website, and you are storing that content on a storage like S3 or on a Google Cloud storage, you will have to you'll end up copying that same content to the Vimeo platform as well, and then getting the Vimeo URL to embed on your website, right? So you would end up duplicating content or making changes to your video workflows to integrate a tool like Vimeo in your platform, right? So that's again not a very ideal situation to be. Better than YouTube, but not the most ideal situation, right? That is what brings us to the topic of this webinar as well, that the best experience would be if we can build a completely native experience for videos on our website and apps, right? Something that's completely customizable. It fits our branding, it fits the rest of the user interface that we have built. There are no ads if we don't want them, or if we want some ads, we can integrate it, but it should be something that we control. And it is completely tailored to our workflows, or let's say our users' workflows and the infrastructure that we have, right? If I want to show my videos in S3 or in Google Cloud or in Azure, I should be able to do that and still be able to stream videos natively on my website or app, right? The downside of this approach is, while it's great from a user experience point of view and from a development experience point of view, the downside is that video processing is still very hard, right? There are tons of nuances that you need to take care of, like how would a video get processed, what would be the right format, encoding, codecs, not just for video, but for audio as well. Then there are subtitles, creating video thumbnails, etc. It's a lot of things to, if you're running an e-commerce business or you're running a content business, then just understanding how do videos get processed and what should be the right settings that you should use to deliver optimized videos on every device, that's hard, right? And it's hard to manage the entire infrastructure that comes with it, whether that's the storage of the processed videos or the CDN that you need to deliver that video on different devices. So all of that is a lot of setup to be done, right? And it is these disadvantages that we will, solve with the ImageKit video API. And we'll look at a few examples during this webinar on how you can use the ImageKit video API to solve some of the downsides that you see from building native video experiences yourself, so that it becomes very simple for you if you have to deliver native videos on your websites and apps, right? You would have another poll on your screen right now. It would be great if you can maybe submit your responses to that while we move along and start talking about how you can solve for native video experiences on your websites and apps, right? So there are two ways in which you can get started with the ImageKit video API. We do give you an interface like that of a YouTube or a Vimeo. We call it the media library. It's a complete asset management platform. I have it opened on my screen right now, right? So you can see that, in fact, all the videos that I would be using during this webinar are hosted in the media library, right? So you get a nice interface for your team to upload new videos or to share these videos with other team members, collaborate on them, etc. Right? That's one way of doing it, and it can be done via the user interface or it can be uploaded via APIs as well. But the other more interesting part, and that is what a lot of companies do want to use, is that you can also attach your own storage, like an Amazon S3, a Google Cloud Storage, Blob Storage, any web server to ImageKit, right? And if I just take you to the dashboard again, this is where you can basically connect your existing storage to ImageKit. What happens in this case is that your original videos will still continue to be there in your own storage, and ImageKit only acts as a layer on top to deliver optimized videos or to stream videos from that underlying storage over a CDN to a user. I'll just quickly show you what the request flow looks like when you use ImageKit in either of these two options. Let's say you have a user who makes a request on for a particular video file, the request will first go to the content delivery network that comes integrated with ImageKit for fast asset delivery across the globe. Let's say that the content is not yet processed, it's not there on the content delivery network as well. The request would come to the ImageKit server. And then depending on the configuration that you have, if you have connected your external storage, we'll go to your external storage to access the files. If you have it in the media library, we will get the file from your media library. We'll make a request to the media library for that. No matter where we get the video from, let's say we get it from the storage or we get it from the media library, at the ImageKit server, we will do the processing in real time and we will store a copy of the file at this level. We will then send back the optimized file to the CDN. The CDN also stores a copy at its level, and the user ultimately gets an optimized video delivered to them in real time, right? So whether you use the media library for hosting your videos, or if you want to connect your external storage and connect that to ImageKit, the request flow remains the same, that all the processing happens at the time of the first request that comes in for that particular video, right? Uh, Now, if I just, let's move ahead, and the same YouTube video that I showed you on my screen, we'll go and implement it using a native HTML5 video tag, right? And we will look at how ImageKit can help you deliver optimized videos, even with a simple HTML5 video tag, right? So I have this code here. Everything else remains the same. The entire article or the rest of the HTML remains the same, except for the iframe that I had for the YouTube video. I have now replaced it with a standard video tag, which is supported in HTML5 in almost every browser that exists out there. And I have used a video URL. It's a simple MP4 URL. The file is currently stored in my media library right now. I'll just quickly show that to you. So this is an MP4 file, 35 MBs in size, that's there in my media library. And I have just provided that as a source. Nothing has been added to it. I'm not doing any kind of processing as such. And when I come back to my page and I'll just give it a refresh, you can see that the video player now loads. I get some controls to play the file, to mute the file, to go full screen. There is some video that's already been loaded. And if I just click on the play button, the video starts playing as well, right? I can seek ahead like a normal video player and the video will continue playing, right? So this is the simplest version of, let's say, native video delivery that you can have on your website. Whether or not you use ImageKit, but this is like the simplest way to deliver native videos on your website, right? One quick thing that I wanted to show you here is that when you use ImageKit to deliver your videos, ImageKit also takes care of automatically optimizing your videos to the right format, right? So we saw in the media library that the original video that we started off with was a 35 MB MP4 video. Over here, if you see, the video has been automatically converted to WebM format, because I'm accessing this video on a Chrome browser which supports WebM. So it has been converted to WebM format. And if I just filter out the requests, I can see that the content length, which is approximately 6.6 megabytes now, so down from 35 MBs plus from the original file, we're down to 6.6 MBs of WebM file. If I open the same file in a Safari browser, which does not support WebM, and I'll again just refresh the file, click on play, the video again starts playing. And the only difference over here is that instead of it being in WebM format, the video is now getting delivered in MP4 format, right? The file size obviously is different. It's 15.9 MBs in size, but it's still less than half the size that we started off with, right? So we started off with a 35 MB plus MP4 video, whereas ImageKit is now able to deliver it in 15.9 MBs. And at the same time, we're also delivering it from a CDN, right? So this is currently getting delivered on the integrated CDN itself. So while using ImageKit, you can use any technology or let's say any video file that you want with your video tag. But when you use ImageKit, we automatically take care of optimizing that video, compressing that video, converting it to the right format that's supported on the browser that loads it. And we also stream it using a CDN so that it loads quickly on the end devices, right? Now, I'll quickly show you a few options, right? So when we first loaded the video, we saw that the browser automatically loads more than 50% of the video, right? So the white bar that you see over here, the browser has already loaded this particular video. And we also see that when I start playing this video, there are multiple requests that are being made for this video, right? So you can see there are 3 requests that have already been made, all of them ending in a 206 response code, right? So let's first look at what is the browser actually doing? Why do we see these multiple requests happening on our browser? And I'll give you a very simple explanation of what actually happens on the browser, right? So let's assume the video is 100,000 bytes in size. It's a 30-second video. When you first start playing the video, because it's a long content format, it's a lot of bytes to be transferred. The browser does not actually request for the entire file. It will only request for a part of the file first, right? So let's say the browser requests for 30,000 bytes of the video. It wants to first get some 30,000 bytes. So the browser sends a range request to the server, and the range request would include, let's say, bytes from 0 to 30,000, right? This request goes to ImageKit, right? And ImageKit then finds out the 0 to 30,000 bytes of content that needs to be sent back. It sends it back to the browser along with a content length header that's equal to 30,000 bytes that have been requested, and a content range header as well in response, right? The and when you start seeking the video, let's say you have already reached here and the browser now has to make the next request. So the browser again sends a range request. Let's say this time it starts from 30,001 and now it requests, let's say, up to 80,000 bytes of content to be sent. In response, ImageKit, or let's say any other server that supports partial content, that is what the 206 response is for, partial content response. Any server that supports partial content response will respond with only these bytes, right? Now, the amount of content that a browser would request for, it actually depends on the browser is actually looking for the bare minimum information it needs to load the particular file. It is looking for a thumbnail. It is looking for the duration of the video, the entire video, right? So for example, when I load this video, the browser already knows that it is a 1 minute, 3 second video. It has some thumbnail available to it as well, right? So the browser is actually looking for all of this information. So we have very little control on how much the browser would request. It totally depends on the video itself. And in MP4s, it's called the move atom. The browser is actually trying to find that and preloads that much of content before it starts playing the video file, right? You can have some control on this behavior. So I have 2 options that we will use over here. So one, if you see, I had preload auto, right? So we were relying on the browser to preload this particular content. I can set it to preload none, which means that the browser now does not load anything. So you can see that it is not able to load the thumbnail. It still does not know the video length at this stage because it has not fetched anything about the video, right? There is another option where I can set this to preload metadata, right? In this case, the browser now accesses only the thumbnail and only the duration is available, and it has a very little streaming that it has already done, right? This is probably the bare minimum amount of streaming that the player needs to do, to get that metadata information, right? So this is one setting. And the other is that, let's say if you want to change the thumbnail that shows up, right? This preview that shows up in the video player, then again, you can use the poster attribute. Over here, you can see ImageKit again makes it really simple to create a thumbnail of your choice. I have the same MP4 URL that I'm using in the source. The only change is that I have suffixed ik and a parameter, which is SO, start offset, which means that I want the frame to be from the 22nd frame of the video, right? This is where I want to get the thumbnail from. Once I save this, and if I load the video now, you can see that the thumbnail now is different. The browser has loaded only a very bare minimum amount of content, and we are still ready to play the video. The moment I click on play, the video streaming starts as usual, right? So we'll take a pause here. If you have any questions about the kind of native video streaming, which is called progressive streaming, by the way, if you have any questions about this, I'm happy to answer a few questions before we move ahead and talk about some different kinds of native video streamings as well. You would have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. You can post your questions there if there are any. Um, so there is a question, do all browsers support native controls? If by native controls you mean the play and the mute option or the full screen option, so most modern browsers would support them already. It's only a very few active browsers that would actually not support this. So for example, you can see that, this is Safari. It has a few different functions as well, like seeking ahead by a few seconds or seeking back by a few seconds, picture in picture mode. But some of these controls can be controlled as well. You can specify which controls to show in the player or not. But most modern browsers would at least give you the bare minimum controls of a play button, a seek bar, a volume button, and an option to go to full screen. At least these options would be available in all browsers. Right. If there are no more questions, we'll just move ahead. Okay, there is one more. Is the ImageKit API same as Cloudinary? Pretty similar, not the same, not the exact same thing. One ImageKit does work, let's say, with your own storages as well. The API itself, let's say the transformation API or the way that we will do adaptive streaming, which is what we'll cover next. So some of these methods would be different. So therefore, the integration with your own storages and let's say with the media library would actually give you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you build those native video experiences yourself. So, Duncan, to answer your question, what's the advantage of using IK or straight up over AWS? So, as you can see right now, from the demos that we have done, ImageKit also uses AWS CloudFront as a CDN integrated. But if you were to use AWS, you will have to build all of this functionality using different services, like how do you encode a video or transcode it? How do you store it, manage the CDN, understand what would be the different, let's say, processing settings of a video, what should be the right bit rate, etc. Right. So you would have to take care of all of that, and manage that storage of the processed video that you have and the streaming. So ImageKit just takes care of that for you. Right. So and there is another question that, does it integrate with Google Cloud Storage or does it support HLS? So yes, it does. And that would be the next part that we, cover during our webinars, right? I'll just walk you through that in a while. Is IK transcoding the video stored on AWS S3? Yes. So even if you have a video stored on an external cloud storage, as I had shown in my first workflow, that we'll get the video from the any connected cloud storage. We'll basically do all the processing and we will send back the processed video over the CDN. Great. So we'll move ahead. Keep posting your questions if there are any, and then we can cover it in the next time we take a pause. Uh, the downside that we had in this kind of streaming was that regardless of what my network speed is or what my device type is, it's still just one single video file that is being loaded for everyone, right? So even if my network speed drops, there is no way for the video quality to be reduced. The user will still have to load the exact same video quality. So if it's a 15 MB MP4 file, even on a slow network, you would be forced to download that file. So this particular native video tag, it's really great for short videos. Or if you're currently using a lot of GIF images on your website and you want to convert them to MP4, which is also a recommendation by Google, then you should use the video tag. In fact, the videos that you see on our website right now, this is a very simple implementation of the video tag itself. This is nothing fancy that's happening over here. But let's say if you have a longer video that you want to stream, right? So you cannot have your users load an entire 15 MB, 30 MB video without it adapting to the network. And that is where the adaptive bitrate streaming comes in, right? So you would have seen this on YouTube that, when you're playing a video, you get these different quality options on your player. And if your network speed changes, the player also changes the video quality that it is loading for you, right? So we will look at how do we build something very similar to what you've already seen on YouTube. How do we get to these quality levels? How do we create a player using this? We would be using video.js, which is an open source video player that's available. You can use any other player of your choice. The underlying functionality remains the same. So you can use HLS.js, React Native player, JW player, XO player, whatever your choice is. And we would be using ImageKit again to do this adaptive streaming. But again, you can use any other underlying, let's say, tool to do the same thing. The technology still remains the same, right? So we'll first look at how does adaptive streaming work, like a very high level overview of how adaptive streaming works. And then we will look at an actual code and an actual example of how this gets done, right? So let's say in our previous example, we had just one particular video track that we had, right? Uh, and that same video track was getting loaded on all the devices. In adaptive bitrate streaming, what happens is that the video itself gets divided into shorter segments, right? So we're not, let's say, looking at an entire 30-second video. Let's say we divide the video into 6 small segments of maybe 5 seconds each, right? Then each segment is encoded to different resolutions, right? So let's say I will pick up segment 1 and I will convert it to 360p resolution, to 480p resolution, and to 720p resolution. So 720p or 360p, these are basically, let's say, if you have a video frame like this, then this height that you have, this is basically 360 or 480 or whatever number that might be, right? So each segment, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, each of these segments needs to be converted into all these 3 resolutions, or if you have a 1080p, then a 4th resolution as well. And then these smaller chunks of video files, all of them need to be stored somewhere. Apart from this, let's say smaller chunks that get created, there also needs to be a playlist file that gets created, right? What a playlist file would do is that it will give the browser or the video player that's there in the browser on your app, it will give it a list of all of these different chunks and all of these different resolutions that have been created so that the player can start loading different segments. So what will happen is that when you start loading the video with adaptive streaming, let's say the player will start at 360p for the first segment. It realizes that the network speed is good enough and that it can start loading a better quality video as well. And then maybe it will jump to 720p for the next 2 segments, right? While the video quality is, or let's say while the network quality is great. And let's say the network speed drops again, it can again switch to maybe 480p for the next segment and keep loading 480p for the remaining time duration till the network speed changes, right? So in this way, we can see that by creating different resolutions for the same video and by dividing the video into smaller segments, we give the video player an option to switch from one resolution to the other for that particular segment depending on the network quality or on other device conditions, right? And it also gives the player a lot more control that if I, for example, if I seek ahead in a video, let's say I was here, and if I seek ahead in the video, the player knows that it has to start loading only from this particular segment onwards, right? It does not do any extra loading apart from the segment that it is actually on, right? Now, obviously, this is a more complex functionality. This is not something that can be done with the native video player that we have available in HTML5. And that's the reason why we need to load a separate player like a video.js on our page, right? So that is what I've done in this example. I've loaded a few JS files, right? So a video.js file, then a HTTP streaming file, which would actually help us with the HLS stream that we would be doing. And there is another file for the quality selector, which we'll come to a little later, a CSS file for the video.js player that we will use. And in my code, the only change is that instead of the native video tag that we have replaced it with the video.js tag. I am providing it with a source, but now the source is not an MP4 file. It's the playlist that we talked about, right? So this playlist is basically what gets created when I add this ikmaster.m3 UAT. this creates an HLS manifest or an HLS playlist for adaptive streaming. Again, there is nothing special that you have to do when you're using ImageKit. You just append ikmaster.m3u8 to your MP4 URL. Or if you want to do dash streaming, then you can append ikmaster.mpd to your URL. And after you have specified this, you need to specify the representations that you want for your file, right? The different resolutions that you want for it. So in this particular case, I'm loading a 360p, 480p, 720p, and a 1080p file. Again, like my previous example, I still have the poster file or the thumbnail file that I want to load at the same 20-second. And let's take a look at how does this work out. So this is my page. I'll give it a refresh and you can see that the player still loads. It's different from the video player that loaded when we use the native video player. The thumbnail is the same, the poster image that we specified. And when I click on this particular play button, the video starts playing just like we had with the native video player. But this time there is a small difference that's there in the request data being made. So if you see over here, the player actually loaded the first playlist. The playlist itself had a some other playlist for different resolutions, let's say 360p, 480p, 720p, etc. Then it starts with the 480p segments. So you can see that it loaded segment 0, then segment 1, 2, and so on, right? So it keeps loading different segments till it reaches the end of the file or wherever you are currently buffering. If I change this, let's say I will simulate a different network speed in my browser. Let's say I start with 3G speed. I'll really slow down my browser. So let's start with slow 4G. I do not want to slow it down a lot. So we'll start with slow 4G. You can see that it still starts at 480p. I start playing the video. It's slower than earlier. But if I now reduce the speed to slow 3G, you can see that after the third second, it's taking a lot of time to load the third segment of the 480p file. The player then automatically drops to the 360p segments over here, right? So now the third segment, because the player had still not reached the third segment, so it loaded even the third segment at 360p. The fourth segment is also loaded at 360p and so on. Now, if I improve the network speed again, let's say I remove any kind of throttling, the player again comes back to 480p for the other video segments that are there, right? So this demonstrates that with adaptive streaming, as I was changing the network speed on my device, the player was automatically able to adapt the segments that were loading or adapt the quality that was loading on the player, right? At this stage, we still do not know what quality is loading, right? I'm showing you this quality on the network tab, but there is still no quality control for the video over here. And that is why we had loaded this quality selector. It's a separate plugin that gets added to Video.js. So all that we need to do is I'll just take this code and uncomment it. Sorry. I'll take this code and uncomment the the display current quality functionality. And I have another, let's say, functionality that can be implemented in Video.js is that I can specify the playback rates also as a configuration option, right? When I do this, let's save this file and load the player again. You can see that now there are two other options that come up with the video player. One allows me to change the playback speed. Let's say I can slow it down. You can see that the video has slowed down. And then I have the option to select the quality as well. Let's say I forcefully select 1080p. You can see that the player starts loading the 1080p segments to stream the video now, right? The video is playing at 0.5x rate and the quality has now been fixed, right? So this demonstrates that with adaptive streaming, we are able to adapt the video to the network conditions that the user is observing. And just like we had with normal video streaming using HTML5, ImageKit still takes care of creating all of these different variations that we had to create, 360p, 480p, etc. All that you had to do was just bring your MP4 file, right? Either upload it to the media library or upload it to a connected storage to ImageKit and just append these parameters to the URL. We'll take care of creating all of these variants, storing it in a storage, delivering it over the CDN so that you, or let's say your development team, they can just focus on the on the actual code and deliver great video experiences on your websites and apps, right? However, I hope this part is clear. However, there are a few considerations that we need to do when we are using adaptive streaming. While this would look great, right? The idea is great that, your video would be able to adapt to the network condition that the user is on. But the first thing that we need to question is that, do we really need videos for our use case, right? And there are some use cases where you may not need adaptive streaming, right? So to give you an example, let's say if you have really short product videos that are there on your website, maybe it's just a 5-second shot or a 6-second shot of a video of the product that you have, right? Which means that it would possibly be just 1 or 2 segments in length, right? And if it is that short a video, then the player itself does not have a lot of time to actually be able to adapt to the network speed that the user is observing, right? It would probably load just one particular resolution. Let's say it's loads 480p, and it will just load the first segment and the second segment at the same resolution. It does not really have the time to adapt the stream, right? So for small video content, for short video content, you actually may not need adaptive streaming at all, right? Because to accomplish adaptive streaming, we did see that, we need to load some extra JS files, some extra CSS files on our page, which is not the case with the native video tag. We really don't need to load anything specific to the video. These are just CSS files for beautification. So if it's a really short file, you may want to do away with loading a video player for adaptive streaming. Next consideration is that if you have some content like this on your website, right, where you do not want the video to be in a lower resolution, right? This is our, let's say, homepage. We want each video and all the text that you see in the video to be like really clear, regardless of what the network speed is on, because this is what is describing the feature. In this case, we purposefully do not want the video to be loaded at a lower resolution, right? So in this case, we'll just fix a resolution which we know will work best with our layout, and we'll just keep loading that in a normal video tag. We do not need adaptive stream to happen in this case. The third consideration is that what should be the starting level of the stream, right? So when we were, let's say, loading this particular video, every time the player started at 480p segments, right? This was probably because of the player size that I had, which is close to 480 pixels in height, and it sort of starts at that particular resolution for the video. But all players also provide you with an option of what should be the starting playlist that it should start with. Should it start at the lowest resolution, let's say start at 360, or should it start at a higher resolution like 1080? The player would still be able to adapt the video as it plays, but you can still specify the starting quality that you want to load for your player. And that would actually determine how quickly the video starts loading, right? So if you load the smallest possible quality to begin with, the video would start playing really quickly, but it would be a poorer quality video. If you start the video stream at 1080p, then the video would take time to start streaming. Maybe it will take a few extra seconds, but then the video that plays would be a really high quality video, right? So this totally depends on your business requirements, on what's the starting level of the stream that you want. And again, depending on your user interface or depending on your requirements, you also need to decide what representations do you want to create for your video, right? So in a lot of cases, while it is possible to create even a 4K adaptation of a video, or let's say, go as low as 360p, but in a lot of cases, either your end users may not have devices to support, or let's say to stream 4K content, your original content might not be at that particular resolution, or you might not have users who actually need a 360p resolution, right? So we need to keep in mind that while we can create a lot of different resolutions for our video, it only increases the processing time. It only increases the number of segments that the player can possibly load, and it increases the variations that can be there in the user experience or in the load time, without really benefiting the end user, right? So these are like four important considerations that you should keep in mind, that even though adaptive streaming looks like the best possible thing to do, but it may not be suitable for your use case, right? Let's look at another example of a very popular content format, which is, let's say, the vertical videos that we see on platforms like Instagram or even on LinkedIn for that matter. Introduce some vertical videos at some point of time. So I have this particular vertical video that I have again, it's stored in the media library. I'll just replace this and reload the page. And you can see that the player gets, by default, it gets these black bars in the side. The adaptive streaming still works, but having these black bars on the side is not ideal. So let's say if you want to create an interface like that of Instagram Reels or maybe YouTube Shorts, the next example actually walks you through that, right? So we have this particular page. I will first show you what's the functionality of the page, and then we will look at how you can create something like this natively using ImageKit, or maybe, if you want to use some other tool as well. So on this page, we have 12 videos that get loaded. You can see that there are thumbnails for each of these videos. And when I hover on these videos, you can see that there is a short trailer that plays for the video, right? So if I hover on this particular video, uh, the let me just reload this slide. So if I hover on this video, the video starts playing. This is the short trailer that loads. Similarly, if I just keep hovering on different videos, there are short trailers that are playing. And when I click on a particular video file, you can see that again, the video segment loaded. It starts with a particular, 480p segments, moves up to 1080p. So we are able to implement adaptive streaming for our videos, when we have to go full screen. It takes up the entire space. So it's really very similar to the vertical video viewing experience that you want to create on mobile, right? So now let's take a look at how do we create something like this while your videos, let's say your original videos, are in S3, for example, right? So on this page, again, we're not doing something very different. We're just loading the standard video.js files, the CSS and the JS files on the page. We do have a grid for videos, which gets populated using JavaScript. I'll just show you that. And we have an empty video player right now, because when we click on each video, we want a different video to get streamed. So as of now, you would see that when we are starting the page, the source is empty. The source would get filled up when we click on the video, right? Next up, we have a list of videos that we have. And this would be a very typical scenario that you would have a list of videos maybe available in your database. Maybe these are files that are there in your cloud storage. And over here, I just have these video URLs using ImageKit that I have added. There are no transformations yet that I've added to this video. It's just a list of MP4 files that I have. And just for the sake of my user interface, I've also added the number of views and number of comments randomly on each video. Now, from this list of videos, let's say this list of videos goes to your Android application or to your website through an API. Now your end client device, so let's say your Android application, can create different variants just by using the ImageKit video API and appending the right parameters to it, right? So for example, we already saw in our previous, let's say, adaptive bitrate streaming example, that I just need to append ikmaster.m3u8 and specify the resolutions that I want as parameters. So in this case, I'm creating 480p, 720p, and 1080p variants for an HLS stream. So this is going to be my adaptive streaming URL, which gets played when I click on the video and it goes into that full screen view, right? I also want to create a thumbnail. So again, using ImageKit, I'm just appending thumbnail.jpg to the video MP4 URL. And additionally, I'm resizing the thumbnail as well, right? So I'm on a mobile interface right now. I really do not want the entire 1080 pixel height or 1920 pixel wide thumbnail to get loaded. I want a smaller thumbnail to get loaded for performance reasons. So I am loading a much smaller thumbnail, 400 by 600 at the second of the video. And then I want a short trailer to play when I hover on the video, and to create that short trim of that video. Again, I'm using the same aspect ratio as my thumbnail because I really want to, make it look, blend smoothly with the thumbnail and as we transition to the trailer. So it's the same size, starts at the same second, but I have now cropped it to 5 seconds of duration, right? So the DU parameter specifies the duration of my trailer, right? So you can see that by using ImageKit, and there are some 25 plus transformations that we can apply on videos in real time, whether these videos are in your own storage, whether they are in our media library. You can apply these transformations in real time, including, let's say, maybe even adding a watermark to your video. If you want to add maybe your brand's logo in the top left corner of your video, you can do that using these real-time transformation parameters that you see. And then after that, there is just a bunch of code that we have written to create that interface, to add those thumbnails on the page, to play that trailer, etc. And finally, when I click on a video, then we basically populate the player with the HLS URL that we have, which is the manifest file that we are creating, or the playlist that we are creating. And we just play the file, play the player, request the player to play the manifest file that it has loaded, so that the video streaming can start, right? So in this way, we can even create a vertical video viewing experience using ImageKit's real-time transformation APIs, right? This brings us to the end of the webinar, right? So we have discussed most of the points that we had to cover. I'll just quickly summarize what we have already seen in this webinar, right? So you have a poll on your screen as well. So do take some time to respond to, what are the features that you really find interesting with the video API or the video processing. But in this particular webinar, we did look at different ways of embedding videos on your website, right? From a YouTube iframe to a simple HTML5 video tag, to using Video.js for a native adaptive streaming experience, to creating a vertical real kind of an interface for mobile, right? We looked at how ImageKit Video API is able to take care of all the processing, converting these files into different formats, to break down the file into different chunks, store it somewhere, and stream it as well. It's a really simple URL based API. It works the same way as the image transformations. If you're already using ImageKit for image transformations, you would have noticed that the video API is very similar in terms of the transformations that we have to provide. Again, no extensive setup needed for your end. Just connect your storage or upload the file to the media library, and you can start delivering native video experiences that are tailored to your workflows, right? So now if you have a few more questions, we can just quickly answer that. I already have one. Um, are we using FFmpeg under the hood for processing, transcoding, encoding? I'm not from the technical team, so I do not have complete clarity on that. But yes, it would be a bunch of tools that are getting used, different ones for different formats, possibly under the hood, that are being used for this video transformations. If there are any other questions, please, send them out right now. We would also love to get some feedback. Let's say on this webinar content, you would have a poll on your screen right now. If you like the webinar content or you did not like the webinar content, do let us know. Or what's the kind of topics that you would want to cover, you would want us to cover in the future. Do let us know with your comments in that particular poll. I have one more question that's coming in. Streaming decorative background video without controls or audio, would you use bitrate streaming or just media queries? Yeah. So this is a question about, if you have a background video that's loading on your page, right? So let's say if you have a hero banner video, um, that takes up the entire width of the screen and it's loading on the page. There is no audio. It just needs to loop through again and again. Would you use adaptive bitrate streaming, or is media queries enough to optimize? So we did this very recently with a customer. I would suggest that you do use adaptive streaming over there, because the kind of video resolution we are looking at, let's say it's a full width video for your laptop. So it's at least, let's say 1440 pixels wide and a few hundred pixels in height. So it would be a lot of content to load, for a device that's experiencing slower network. So if you always load a really high resolution, like 1080p video always, the video streaming might be slow for some users. So you can start at a lower resolution using adaptive bitrate streaming. You might not want to go as low as 360p for those videos, because it will just, blur out the entire banner video that's playing in the background, and maybe that's not something that you want. So maybe you can start lower. Let's say start lower at 480p or at least at 720p, so that it's lighter than, let's say, a full HD version and it loads a bit quickly. But yeah, I would not recommend loading just the plain 1080p video, especially if it's a really long video that's there. Can we combine bitrate streaming with media queries? So the player itself, right? I might be wrong, and I might want to come back, let's say, on this question after the webinar as well. But the player itself, as my screen size changes, the player also changes the video stream that's playing. And maybe I can just quickly show that to you in this demo as well. I'll just go back to the previous file that we had, which was the space shuttle launch. And if you see over here, it loads a 480p segment to begin with. If I start playing the video, it continues with the 480p segments, but the moment I go full screen and it needs a bigger resolution to be loaded, you can see that the player automatically switched to the 720p segments, right? It's because the player needs a bigger resolution to, maintain the quality of the stream, right? So this is something that most players would do automatically for you, right? The moment you change your resolution, they would automatically adapt. And that's also the reason why the player is always starting at 480p in this particular case, because the player height itself is close to 480p, right? So it's 371 pixel, the player height. So that's why it's starting at 480, which is the next biggest resolution that's available to it. So the player sort of takes care of those, screen sizes and maybe the orientation that it would have. So I think it should take care without having the media queries as well. About adaptive streaming, is it worth using it for videos that range in the duration of 30 seconds to 1 minute, videos up to 720p? This can be a good way to, for you to basically test this out. So when you load a video using, let's say, you can pick up that video and load it with the standard video player. You can compare the video size that you load in WebM format, for example. What's the content length that you are getting in WebM format? Then you compare it to the size of files that you need to load, let's say the video JS file or the CSS files that you need to load. So that would be almost like 300 KBs of file that you would need to load on every page. If your video files take much more than that, let's say your video files take 10 MB or 15 MB, and there would be at least, uh, if they're upwards of 30 seconds in length, so I'm assuming there would be at least 5 segments that would get created for each video. So I think you can still use adaptive streaming. But again, the considerations that we had shared earlier, that, is it some kind of content that you do not want to be delivered in 360p, you want it to be at high quality, then you may want to stay away from adaptive streaming. But you should definitely assess that what is the compressed size at 720p resolution that you can get maybe in WebM format, versus what's the size that gets loaded because of these JS files that are getting loaded, and then what's the size of these different segments of the video that are getting loaded. If you see a large difference in the amount of content that gets loaded, you should go for adaptive streaming. Typically, if it's more than 5 or 6 segments that will get loaded, more than 30-40 seconds of video, you might benefit by using adaptive streaming for your videos. Right. If there are any more questions, you can send them in. Otherwise, I'll just give you an update. We are also doing another webinar, which might be of interest to you. Like I said, we are going to do a series of webinars moving forward. So this webinar is, it's a more technical webinar that we would be doing the next time, right? So in this, the webinar that I did today, the examples were really simple. We were just looking at some, simple tags to be replaced, some very simple JavaScript and HTML. In the next webinar, we would actually be creating a complete YouTube clone, right? So how do you upload a video? How do you process it? Show the processing status, show the thumbnails, do the adaptive bitrate streaming that you have to do. So, all the things that are needed to create a simple YouTube clone. This would help your development team, right? You might not want to join, but do forward it to other developers in your team. It would help them understand the basics of how do we create a system like YouTube? How do we build something like that on our own? And not just by using ImageKit, but then that knowledge can then be applied to any, let's say, video streaming application that you have to build in the future, right? So this would be a technical deep dive using React.js. You would get the invite for this soon as well. Feel free to forward it to other team members in your team if they would be more suitable, or if they are the developers in your team. And this would be a more technical deep dive into video streaming and processing and uploads as well. So there is a question, how does the pricing work if someone brings in their existing storage and CDN as well? So I'll just give a very quick idea on how the pricing works. I'll go back to the request workflow, right? So there are a few components of pricing, right? So the first time that a video would get processed, so there is something called VPUs that get consumed for a video, right? So this is charged only one time. It is directly proportional to the duration of the output and the resolution of the output that is there. So after this, let's say one-time processing charge that gets charged, you do get charged for the output bandwidth that is there on the CDN. If you're using your own storage, there is no charge for storage, obviously, because this is your own storage. ImageKit does not charge you for the variants of files that it would generate, right? So if you have a 100 MB MP4 file in your S3, and there are 6 or 7 different variants that get created out of it at, let's say, 50 MBs in size, we do not charge you for that storage of variants that gets generated. We only charge you for the one-time processing and the final delivery of files. If you want to bring in your own CDN, there are special enterprise plans for it. You can reach out to support@imagekit.io or sales@imagekit.io with some more specific requirements, and then our team would understand your requirement in a bit more detail to help you explain how the commercials work in a case where you bring your own CDN. But that's usually an enterprise use case, so you'll need to understand your requirements a bit more. Right. I think I've covered all the other questions. We're almost at the end. So if there are any last minute questions that you want me to answer, I can do that. Otherwise, I hope that this webinar has been helpful to you. I know we used a bit of ImageKit examples during this course of webinar, but the underlying fundamentals of how a video tag works, or how video.js works, or how you can use adaptive streaming, these remain the same. So I hope that you did gain something out of it, which you can take back to your teams. And if you're looking to implement maybe videos in the future, or you're already, integrating some form of videos on your website and app right now, maybe this webinar would help you improve on the experience that you are delivering to your end users. And based on your feedback that you would have shared in the polls, if not, you can maybe still do it right now. Based on your feedback in the upcoming webinars that we do, we will look to create more useful content for you, so that these webinars are helpful for you to improve the kind of media experiences that you deliver on your websites and apps. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. I don't think there are any more questions coming in. It was really great having all of you on this webinar. And we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar that we do on the 5th of March.